Okay. I know why you're happy. I know. Thank you. I know why it stopped raining. We had a lot of rain, but that was right. California had rain. So much, half the state, they say, is out of the drought. And Governor Newsom's really leaning into it. His new campaign slogan is, Newsom, he'll make you wet. The ladies know what I'm talking about, huh? No. Also, Tuesday, a couple of days ago, the California's COVID emergency ended. So that's nice. So if you have a friend who is still living like a prisoner, it's because they tried to quit Scientology. That's nothing to do with COVID anymore. Yeah, COVID, big in the news there. The Department of Energy said that they think it was most likely that it did come from the lab, the Wuhan lab. I mean, this has been I've said from the beginning, should not be political. Let's just find out the science. But that's what the FBI says that. Some people say that it could have leaked from the lab. And this is a big story. The manager at the Wuhan Bat on a Stick today said, where do I go to get my reputation back, you know? But we don't know. That's the thing. We don't know. Stop politicizing everything. We're so arrogant. They know. You don't fucking know. Nobody knows. Even the Department of Energy, which said they think this is happening, they said we're reporting this with low confidence. Then why say anything, low confidence? Well, you know what? You work for the government. We have that for you, too. Okay? But what does that mean? So what, they were staring at their shoes when they said it? We think it might have come from the lab, but, you know. We got a lot of shit wrong. What is it? They're talking like a valley girl. It came from the lab? And then people got sick and stuff? Our government. So, you know, the Republicans have taken over the House now. So the Ethics Committee there, they're investigating AOC because of that dress she wore at the Met Gala. Remember that? The tax the rich dress. There's something about improper gifts or whatever it is. Younger viewers who are watching this show might need to know that this is not the first time the Democrats have had a scandal that involved a dress with something on it.
Good morning. It is Friday, April the 28th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Star-Spangled Banner and the Serenity Prayer, we will have Stuart Varney, Velshi, Senator-Jodi-Ernst, No Free Lunch, The Rape of the Mind, and Glenn Beck. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and remove your hats for the national anthem of the United States of America.
Can you see by the dawn?
Thank you. And now, No Free Lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
Differences in habits and attitudes are differences in human capital, just as much as differences in knowledge and skills. And such differences create differences in economic outcomes. Thomas Sowell. Oftentimes, habits and attitudes can make a bigger difference in economic outcomes than even knowledge and skill. No attempt to manipulate an equal economic outcome can ever succeed, and the reason is embedded in this reality right here. The differences of human capital always create different outcomes. Human capital is indeed the combination of our habits, attitudes, and yes, abilities. Individual responsibility supports the habits and attitudes that drive positive outcomes.
And that was the No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute.
There are two pillars to this job as a journalist. The first is to bear witness to what's happening. The second is to hold power to account. We've got a power gap, a wealth gap, and more than ever, a communications gap. My work is to facilitate a dialogue. All of us are better off when we're around people with different backgrounds and perspectives. And the only way we effectively speak truth to power is by truly understanding all sides of an argument.
Thank you. And now, this is going to be Glenn Beck introducing Tucker Carlson, this is a statement Tucker Carlson made on social media subsequent to his parting ways with Fox News. So, here we go.
I don't know if you saw the Tucker Carlson little mini monologue that he put online yesterday. Let's play this here.
Good evening, it's Tucker Carlson. One of the first things you realize when you step outside the noise for a few days is how many genuinely nice people there are in this country. Kind and decent people who really care about what's true. And a bunch of hilarious people also. A lot of those. It's got to be the majority of the population, even now. So that's heartening. The other thing you notice when you take a little time off is how unbelievably stupid most of the debates you see on television are. They're completely irrelevant. They mean nothing. In 5 years, we won't even remember that we had them. Trust me, as someone who's participated. And yet at the same time, and this is the amazing thing, the undeniably big topics, the ones that will define our future, get virtually no discussion at all. War, civil liberties, emerging science, demographic change, corporate power, natural resources. When was the last time you heard a legitimate debate about any of those issues? It's been a long time. Debates like that are not permitted in American media. Both political parties and their donors have reached consensus on what benefits them, and they actively collude to shut down any conversation about it. Suddenly, the United States looks very much like a one-party state. That's a depressing realization, but it's not permanent. Our current orthodoxies won't last. They're brain dead. Nobody actually believes them. Hardly anyone's life is improved by them. This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. At the same time, the liars who've been trying to silence them shrink, and they become weaker. That's the iron law of the universe. True things prevail. Where can you still find Americans saying true things? There aren't many places left, but there are some, and that's enough. As long as you can hear the words, there is hope.
There you go. That was Tucker Carlson, and before that was one of the best voices on radio, Glenn Beck. Early Rush Limbaugh had the best voice in radio in the first trimester of his radio career. But now it is Glenn Beck, absolutely the best voice on radio in terms of the richness and the general quality, the timbre, and et cetera. Content of his show leaves quite a lot to be desired, but at least he has a damn good voice. There's so many people, Republican talk show hosts, that are on the air for reasons other than vocal talent, and that's a shame, and it shouldn't happen. But anyway, so one of the things I want to talk about real quick with Tucker Carlson, interesting message, but he gets it wrong when he says that there's real debates about natural resources and all that. It's deeper than that. Right now, the real debate that we should be having, that we are in a proxy sense, is about reality or metaphysics. Metaphysics, epistemology, which is knowledge, and ethics and aesthetics. Those are the arguments that or debates that we should be having. And perhaps the most important debate that we should be having overall is the debate about hierarchy. And so go on to Kindle, and there's some books on hierarchy. Also, you might go ahead and go to Wikipedia and look up hierarchy, because there's more to it than just what you would think than the dictionary definition. Okay, but the left hates hierarchy, and everything that they're doing in our society now is geared to destroying hierarchy. Hierarchy within the family, hierarchy within our culture, by destroying the Catholic Church, by falsely implying that somehow just that the Catholic Church is responsible for the priests that have broken the law and done unspeakable things to our children, and that the Boy Scouts, they've succeeded in, if not destroying the Boy Scouts, then certainly lessening their cultural influence. And the same thing with the Catholic Church, where they're lessening their cultural influence. And both of those are organizations that are hierarchical. The Catholic Church, obviously so, but both of them obviously so. And the left hates hierarchy. That's one of the reasons why there's the reason why they make big arguments about the beauty contests and about runway models. Runway models has nothing to do with anorexia or what they're teaching our kids. That's an excuse. The real reason is hierarchy. And beauty, aesthetics, or axiology is about hierarchy. It's about who's beautiful, who's ugly, or what's beautiful and what's ugly. But it's also, axiology is a study of that, to find out what it is about something that we find beautiful, what is it about something we find ugly, and why. So, and then with in terms of art, aesthetics, there's some theories about that balance is something that we find attractive, and color and depth, and et cetera, et cetera. There's several, 5 or 6 or 7 different things that have been identified that will produce a positive response in us, artistically speaking. So that's really the arguments that we should be having: metaphysics, ethics, epistemology, aesthetics, and most importantly, the biggest of all, hierarchy. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the strategy of criminalization from the rape of the mind.
The strategy of criminalization. As we said before, the citizen of totalitaria may be able to fulfill some of his irrational, instinctual needs in return for his submission to totalitarian slavery. Hitler Germany taught us the accepted pattern. The citizen and party member is encouraged to betray his friends and parents, something the angry, frustrated baby in him has often wanted to do. He may live out in action his deeply repressed aggressions and desires for revenge. He no longer has to suppress or reject some of his own primitive impulses. The system assumes full burden of his guilt and hands him a ready-made list of thousands of justifications and exculpations for the release of his sadistic impulses. Flowery catchwords such as historical necessity, help the individual to rationalize immorality and evil into morality and good. We see here the great corruption of civilized standards. In his strategy of criminalization, the totalitarian dictator destroys the conscience of his followers, just as he has destroyed his own. Think of the highly learned and polished Nazi doctors who started their professional life with the Hippocratic Oath, promising to be the helping healer of man, but who later in cold blood inflicted the most horrible tortures on their concentration camp victims, Meisterlich. They slaughtered innocents by the thousands in order to discover the statistical limits of human endurance. They infected other thousands as guinea pigs because the Führer wanted it so. They had lost their personal standards and ethics completely and justified all their crimes through the Führer's will. Political catchwords encouraged them to yield their consciences completely to the dictator. The process of systematic criminalization requires a deculturation of the people. As one of Hitler's gangmen said, "When I hear the word civilization, I prepare my gun." This is done to consistently arouse the instinct of cruelty. People are told not to believe in the intellect and objective truth, but to listen only to the subjective dictates of the Moloch state, to Hitler, to Mussolini, to Stalin. Criminalization is conditioning people to rebellion against civilized frustrations. Show them blood and bloody scapegoats, and 1,000 years of acculturation will fall away with them. This implies imbuing the people with hysteria, arousing the masses, homogenizing the emotions. All this tends to awaken the brute Neanderthal psyche in man, justify crime with the glamorous doctrine of race superiority, and then you will make sure the people will follow you. Hitler knew very well what he was doing when he turned the German concentration camps over to the unleashed lusts of his stormtroopers. Let them kill and murder was the device. Once they have gone so far with me, they must go on to the end. The strategy of criminalization is not only directed toward crushing the victims of the totalitarian regime, but also toward giving the elite hangmen, the governing gang, the poisonous feeling of power that drags them further and further away from every human feeling. Their victims become people without human identity, merely speaking masks and egoless robots. The strategy of criminalization is the systematic organization of the lower passions in man, in particular, in those the dictator must trust as his direct helpers. Under the pressure of totalitarian thinking, nearly every citizen identifies with the ruling gang, and many must prove their loyalty by murder and killing, or at least expressing their approval of murder and killing. The boredom of totalitaria's automatic patterns of living leads the deluded citizens to welcome the adventure of war and crime and self-destruction. Each new act of torture and crime makes new bonds of fidelity and unscrupulous obedience, especially within the leading gang. In the end, driven by crime and guilt, the ruling members have to stick it out together because the downfall of the system would bring about the downfall of the entire gang, both leaders and followers. The same thing holds true in the criminal world. Once a man has taken the first step and rejected the laws of society and joined the criminal gang, he is at war with the outside world and its moral evaluations. From that point on, the gang can blackmail him and subdue him. In totalitaria, the vicious circle of criminalization of the citizenry, in which the means become the ends in themselves, grows into a cynical conspiracy covered with the cynical flag of decent idealism. The country's leaders use such simple words as the Universal Campaign of Peace, and the citizens rejoice and take pride in these words. Only a few among them know what deceptive deeds lie behind the flowery phrases. These perversions are also incorporated into a great nationalistic myth. The Third Reich, the new empire, the People's Republic, and the citizens' desire to do something heroic becomes identified with doing something violent and criminal. Blood becomes a magic fluid, and shedding someone else's blood becomes a virtuous and life-giving deed. Unlimited killing, as it is practiced in totalitarian systems, is related to deep, unconscious fears. The weak and emotionally sick in any society kill out of fear in order to borrow, in a magic way, their dead victims' strength and happiness, as well as, of course, their material possessions. The killing of millions in the Nazi gas ovens was part of this ancient mythology of murder. Perhaps the member of the master race thought that slaughtering the Jews would ensure that the Germans would endure pain for as many centuries as had their victims. It is part of an old primitive myth that through killing, one fortifies and prolongs one's own life. Let us not forget that forces of reason and understanding in man are rather weak. It is difficult to control the fire of explosive drives once they are lighted. Totalitarianism must kill, slaughter, make war. Totalitaria preaches hatred, and the totalitarian mouthpiece is a lonely, deluded, tough Superman, calling for hatred and injustice and arousing intensified fanaticism unhampered by any moral feeling or remorse. His battle cry reinforces the director's hold on its subjects, because each citizen, in and through his guilty deeds, learns to hate his victim, whose very suffering arouses even more the criminal's deeply buried sense of guilt.
And that was the strategy of criminalization from the Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, MD. Back in a minute. Thank you. A little bit more of Stuart Varney.
A bipartisan group of lawmakers demands President Biden seize Iranian oil and gas shipments. Senator Jodi-Ernst is leading that group, and she joins me here in New York City. All right, Senator, welcome to the show. Welcome to New York.
Yes, thank you.
Do you want the U.S. Navy to get out there in the Gulf and seize Iranian ships?
Well, we do have an obligation to seize Iranian oil and natural gas. We do have to do this. This is something that was really drilled down into during the Trump administration. But what we see so far is Biden refusing to follow the oil sanctions that we have against Iran. Now, under the Trump administration, 75% of the revenues that were generated from oil seizures from Iran were to go to the victims of terrorism, from state-sponsored terrorism. Biden hasn't followed that at all, so we see that victims fund getting lower and lower when it comes to providing support for those victims of terrorism.
It would be an international incident, highly provocative, if the U.S. Navy grabbed an Iranian ship.
But we have those oil sanctions on Iran. That has been the directive. President Biden has not followed that. We see victims of terrorism suffering because of this, and we see Iran continuing to get wealthier and wealthier off of their oil sales. So we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to follow the sanctions that are put into place and make sure we're degrading the capabilities of Iran.
I'm going to change the subject, as I often do in the middle of an interview, and listen to this one. A transgender female beat about 14,000 women in the London Marathon. Now, she's offering to give the medal back. Senator, you're working to protect women in sports. What do you make of this trans athlete handing the winning medal back?
Well, I think it's the appropriate thing to do. We have biological males that are competing against females, biological females. And so I am a co-sponsor of legislation that is the Protecting Women and Girls in Sports Act, which was rejected by Democrats earlier this week. It was passed by the House last week. But we know that there are physiological differences between those that are born as men and women. And Title IX gave women the opportunity to get out there, compete in sports, compete for scholarships and awards. And now we see biological males taking those opportunities away.
The measure that the Democrats rejected, would it have stopped, let me get this right, young men who are transitioning into young women, would it have stopped those people from competing against women in sports? Would that's what you want to do?
Yes, and what the law does then is if any of those groups, whether it's a college or a school that's receiving federal funds, and they allow biological males to compete against biological females in female athletics, they would then be in violation of the law. But unfortunately, it's not now going to be the law of the land because of our Democrats.
Keep fighting.
Thank you.
I understand. It's on the prompter. Your annual roast and ride is coming. You're going to be riding a motorcycle.
Anyway, so the point I was trying to make here with all of this is how chummy and collegial. She's a Senator-Ernst is a Republican from Iowa. And so the Republican comes on the show, and Mr. Varney is basically, chumming up to her, and, oh, isn't this wonderful? We're all Republicans here, and we're having a great time. And as I've said over and over and over again, there are no good guys on Capitol Hill. So he should be putting the tough questions to Miss Joni-Ernst, asking her about, for instance, if we're going to talk about the transsexual, not transgender, the transgender is the word coined by the left. But here's again the Republicans that are just going along with the program. Well, if the left calls it transgender, we got to do the same thing. No, they're transsexuals. That's what they are. There's transsexual and there's transvestite. But anyways, not transgender. He should be asking her, why do you allow this to happen? What are you doing about it? When is this going to happen? Is there any bills in the offing? When are they going to be passed? He should be grinding her. This is a Republican. Republicans are supposed to be making a big difference in Congress. That's what they promised. They all promised that they were going to give us, basically, they're going to get back on track to making America great again. And where is it? Where is it? The other thing he could have asked and should have asked is, what about replacing Obamacare? The Republican Party promised 20, 30 years ago to replace Obamacare, and they failed to do so. When is that going to happen? Another one that's probably the most important thing and should have been number one on their agenda is defunding Planned Parenthood. And he should have put it right to her. When is that going to happen? Do you support it? Number one. And number two is, when is it going to happen? Not will you do it, but when will you do it? Okay, so in other words, put the tough questions to these people. Everybody on Capitol Hill should be treated with suspicion, no matter what, whether they got an R after the name, a D after the name, or they're an independent. They should be treated with suspicion. The Republicans failed to do so, and this is the reason that we have people that get elected, reelected, and re-reelected that spend 30 years in Congress. Some of them have to be wheeled around the Senate because they're so old. They can't walk into the Senate anymore. We had that spectacle, and so. The other thing that he doesn't realize, and you should realize, when she's on his show, she's campaigning. This is a campaign stop. This is about getting face recognition and name recognition for her, if nothing else. So this is something that she'll probably get a clip that she can play during her reelection campaign, but make no mistake, she is campaigning, and Stuart Varney and Fox News should be billing her for that. I'm sure she's got a giant war chest, that she's got all kinds of donations so that she can run for re-election, and she should be coughing up some of that money and paying Varney, and this should be billed as a campaign appearance. And the fact that they don't bill it that way, they, meaning Fox News, is deceptive and wrong. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, a little bit of Stuart Varney. He's got a new Fox poll out. I should say another Fox BS poll. Here we go.
It reveals a majority of voters want more restrictions on gun ownership. Only 45% believe more people having guns will reduce gun violence. Another Fox poll shows...
So we'll get to that other Fox poll in a minute, but here's what it really says. Background checks for, it says here... let's see. Let me see if we can get this clear. There we go. Proposals to reduce gun violence, percent saying favor. So it doesn't say on there. Let me see. Let me look at this and see if they're telling us how many people were polled. It doesn't say. It just says registered voters. So anyways, proposals to reduce gun violence, percent saying favor. So right away the poll is skewed. Okay, this is one of the slick ways that the left or right, whoever slants a poll by the title they're going to give it. is the same way. The one way of the ways that you can get when you're doing initiatives, ballot initiatives, is the Secretary of State can get involved and screw up your ballot initiative by simply giving it a piss poor title, right? So when you have something about reducing taxes and they call it the Killing Puppies and Kittens Act or something. So in this one, they're calling it the proposal to reduce gun violence. And as I've said before, it's not gun violence, it's crime. It's crime. If you had changed this poll to proposals to reduce crime or to reduce violent crime, although I'm not really sure what the difference between crime overall and violent crime would be. It seems to me that all crime is of a violent nature one way or another. So then it says background checks for guns, 87%. Enforce existing gun laws, 81%. Legal age 21 to buy guns, 81%. Ban assault weapons, 80%. More citizens carrying guns, 45%. Now, if the poll had been, what do we do to reduce the crime rate? I'll bet you that the more citizens carrying guns would have been at the top of the list. Because more citizens carrying guns is obviously not going to reduce gun violence. It may reduce crime. And remember, we're talking about crime, we're talking about murder. So perhaps even better way to name the poll is about reducing murder, not gun violence. Because remember, gun violence, if I go to the shooting range, I'm doing gun violence. It's violent, I'm shooting at a target. If I go out hunting, I take a shotgun and I'm going out turkey hunting, I'm engaging in gun violence. What we're really talking about here is crime. It's murder. That's what this really is, and that's the way the poll should have been addressed. So a little bit more now. Next poll.
56% of voters believe abortion should be legal. Sean Duffy joins me. All right, Sean, is it time for Republicans to pivot on these sensitive issues?
Okay, so now he asked this question of his guest, and the question is fallacious. And it's fallacious because what he's assuming when he says pivot is he is assuming that everybody, again, is an island and that everybody is unique. And that in order to attract voters, you have to figure out who these people are, and then you have to speak their language, and you have to absorb their culture, and then convince them that you are like them. So let's say in terms of feminists or being women. Women are something separate and completely apart from and unique as opposed to men. They're not human. I guess they're from outer space or something. So we have to, I guess men in the Republican Party have to go out and try to figure out what do women like, what are the things, and then convince them that we're like them and that we like, enjoy, and support the same things. And that's where we end up with a devil's choice where we're having to decide about whether or not to moderate our position on abortion, although there is no moderation. You either support it or you don't. There's no middle ground. So how do you get out of that? It's very simple. When you remember that we're all human beings, and again, sticking to the abortion issue, if you will, that we're all human beings, then now we're going to go and talk to feminists and tell them why it is they should give up their fantasy that abortion empowers women. That's how we're going to attract people. We go to the Democrat Party, particularly to the women that think of themselves maybe as Kennedy Democrats, Blue Dog Democrats, and we say to them, abortion doesn't empower you. It empowers the men you sleep with. Okay, because while you have your legs in the stirrups and some stranger is probing around in your private parts, your bed partner is out screwing your sister. Or maybe even your mother. So that's something to think about. That's the way you have to approach this. Join us because we know what real empowerment for women is, and that is enforcing child support. So let's see what his guest says.
So first off, on abortion, Stuart, no. I mean, listen, you've had the media pound, this is an idea of freedom with regard to abortion. And when you look at the issue of abortion, it's not just are you pro-choice or pro-life, right? This poll might show that a lot of voters are not exclusively life voters, life at conception, right. But they're also not late-term partial birth abortion. Let's kill babies after birth, which is where the Democrat Party is. So I think there's some confusion. I think a lot of voters fall into, maybe the heartbeat bill. Maybe you're at 12 weeks, maybe you're at 8 weeks with regard to abortion, but banned after that. This poll doesn't really dig into it. In regard to guns, listen, I think if you're under 35 years old, 33 years old, you're opposed to the Second Amendment and a lot of gun ownership because you've been taught that in school. The schools have been indoctrinating our children. I look at our founders. This is not about deer hunting. This was about freedom, making sure you didn't have a tyrannical government, and they wanted the people to be able to have the right to bear arms.
Okay, so anyways, yeah, he butchered that. Like I said, the simplest way to do it is to attack the poll itself. The poll is slanted in favor of the left. It is slanted in favor of gun laws, and because of the way it was phrased and the way it was represented. Again, Mr. Stuart Varney, shame on him, came out and said 87% of Americans want. No, 87% of those surveyed want. 2,000, we'll assume 2,000 people were surveyed, so that means something like 1,800 people out of a country of 365 million want stricter gun laws. Okay, so that's a whole different picture. And what he should have said was, of those surveyed, 87% want XYZ. That's the way he should have put it. But again, for the sake, I guess, of ratings, he misrepresents the poll, slants the poll, and creates unnecessary psychological pressure on you and me. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. So I'm reminding you that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.